thank you and honour you all for that and taking this time to prove outcomes for our young people. It's big. It's a big responsibility. We say it, but yeah, I was a teacher once too, so I understand where what that feels like. But yeah, and just a reminder that all the curriculum we'll be talking about today aligns with the cross-curricular priorities in the Australian curriculum, which is there to enhance all learning areas, and with the Australian was a strong focus on sociology subjects, history, English. But yeah, really encourage you to be creative, to think about how you can embed First Nations knowledges and perspectives across any subject area and year level. But yeah, just want to preempt that the content of the Australian War series is targeted to a more senior level and a strong sociology subject focus. So yeah, what to expect really quickly before I pass on to Rachel, some self-reflections in the next 45 minutes or so, as well as encouraging you to look at local history recognition and truth-telling. Put in some classroom activities from the resources to get you thinking and be able to apply that in your classroom as well as talking about relationships and responsibilities. So I'm going to throw to Rachel, who's going to speak a little bit about some of her learnings from making the series and our shared responsibility and what that looks like moving forward. Thanks, Rach.
Thank you. Yeah, and can I add thanks so much for coming and giving us time. This series was really made for you in many ways. It was made with the intention that it would go into secondary education and be a resource for you and your students. And want to quickly acknowledge Shark Island Foundation for supporting the preparation of the materials. You know, when I went to school, I didn't learn anything about Indigenous history or experiences, and a lot of my friends had very little knowledge. So I knew what it was like for them not to know anything, because I learned it from my family a little bit, you know. So I just saw that there was a gap there. And so, yes, the recognition of this history as part of Australian history, and its sort of centrality to our national narrative is really important, I think. You can look at other countries, and interestingly, you know, that's an interesting project perhaps for students to consider how other countries have looked at recognition. Because, you know, when I've traveled, you go to Germany or South Africa and Aotearoa, New Zealand and Canada, which have all sort of come to terms with their, in various ways, their First Nations identity and past in a way that we just haven't. But I think obviously that's changing, and I work on the, just as an aside, I'm working on the Voice campaign for Yes, and well, I'm volunteering, and what we find is that the biggest support for constitutional recognition is in 18 to 35-year-olds. So it's definitely changing. We see that, and I think that's due to the better education they're getting than the over 55 men who are the least supportive. So I think it really reflects the good work that's being done now in the education system to bring people to a better understanding about this past. So I'm, you know, I don't work in the education field myself, but I make things for that sector. And so I just wanted to encourage you to, I'm not sure how many of you saw the first webinar we did, but I think it's very important for all teachers to take this on. You know, it's all of our shared history. The series is very deliberately a shared narrative, and because it's the story of Australia, right? We're all Australians, so Indigenous people shouldn't have to carry this history like we have for so long alone. It's the responsibility of the education system and all teachers to embrace this as part of their curriculum, I believe. So feel encouraged, and you know, by me certainly, and our communities, to bring this stuff into your classroom. All right, I might leave it there and hand over to the experts.
You're the expert too. Thanks, Rach. Thank you for your dedication over so many years, and for bringing this series to us so we can extend these conversations. Rach is very busy and has to run, but please really encourage you to pop any questions in the chat, and we can get back to you, anything that's come up, or anything specific to Rach as the director, writer, producer, jack of all trades, who's about to run off and do incredible things. So thank you so much for your time, Rach.
Sorry, can I just say a quick thank you to Rachel?
Of course you can.
Like, we do extension history at our school, and your series was fantastic. And one of the biggest things for the girls when we went down to our Corinda room was your father's handprint. It's there at our school, and it was so wonderful to make that connection. So thank you very much. Oh, you're on mute.
Well, you can see my face. So it's like happy. That's really great. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Thanks, Rach. So we're just going to pop a question up now to give you some time to reflect, and just take a moment to think about what you learned about Australian history from a First Nations perspective when you were at school. Teachers are very interesting case studies in that, the majority have gone from a preschool, primary school, secondary, tertiary, and now still in the system. So yeah, I think it's just a good time to reflect about what you learn about at school, whether you want to just do that mentally or write a couple of things down, or just give you a moment. And then in addition to that, before I throw to Manny, one of our beautiful young panelists, just want you to think also about like how you want to lead these conversations in your classroom, and how do you want to nurture young people in education settings when teaching this history as well. And we'll come back to that reflection. And yeah, welcome to pop anything in the chat also. But we have Manny Williams, who's going to speak a little bit about his lived experience. As it reminds us, he's 10 years out of high school now, so consider a young person. But I'm going to let Manny introduce himself and share a little bit about his reflections and how we can look at our local history and honour our young people, our elders, our old people from a young person's perspective. Manny.
Hello, everyone. Thank you all for joining. Before, I just want to also acknowledge country. I'm on Kalkadoon country right now, my beautiful home country. I pay my respects to the elders here, past and present, and I also want to pay respects to any First Nations people on here, and all the elders, past and present, and all the countries you're all joining from. So yeah, my name is Manny Williams. I'm a proud Kalkadoon, Pitapita and Bundjalung man. I've grown up here on Kalkadoon country in Mount Isa. Schooling, what I can remember, and I just had a yarn with my younger brother as well about history, and my youngest brother just graduated high school last year, and there was no local history taught about what had happened here on Kalkadoon country during the Frontier Wars. And so last year I was privileged to be a part of the Culture is Life Fellowship program and part of the Heal Our History campaign. And one of the things I wanted to really speak about is how, we need to recognize each of our local histories on each of the lands that we're all on. There's so much strength and stories that have come out of those, massacres, but there's a lot of resilience that have come out of that. And it's important to recognize each of those stories, because for our young people to feel connected, to feel strong, they need to know the strength of what their ancestors did on that country. And so, but also it is a shared history as well for both, Aboriginal, Torres Strait Islander and non-Indigenous people. And, it's really important that we all understand this history. And for people in the education setting, or if you are educating anyone about it, I believe it's important to recognize it, but speak on it with a place of compassion and understand that, you know, each of these local stories hold so much history. And so when I was in high school 10 years ago, like Dara said, yeah, I cannot remember any sort of local history being taught. And I had to learn it from my father and from my family. And then my youngest brother, who just graduated last year, said the exact same thing. There was no local history taught, which is a shame, you know, and everything, you know, we as Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, you know, everything is interconnected. So we learn these stories, and it goes back to how we as young people as well feel strong and, you know, have this way of walking around proud to say that our old people and our ancestors, you know, did not give up this fight for our country that we're on and the lands that we're all on. And so I want all, you know, I wish when we were in school, each of us, we could all walk around proudly and tell those stories of our warriors and our healers and our women and everyone that come out of what atrocities happen. And I think we need to recognize that, and it's important to do that. You know, I know there are in curriculums in some schools, they are implementing it a lot more, but I think, you know, it has to be done with the right, I guess, intent of really, truly unpacking so much. You know, there's a lot of, yes, intergenerational trauma there, but one thing I've learned recently was the intergenerational resilience in that. And so we have a role to play in that for our young people as well, to, I guess, unpack that in a safe space where they, you know, they are going to feel a lot of emotions. It's going to, you know, unpack a lot of different emotions. They're going to feel some type of way. They might be angry that it happened to them or their family, but also there's so much healing that can be done in that space. So yeah, it's really important to recognize each of our local stories, our local warriors, the history, and, you know, I can't wait to be able to, you know, go around one day to each school and, you know, be able to hear the young people, elders, anybody being proud to say that, yes, I live on this land and this is the history of the warriors that protected this land. And, you know, by doing that, we're also helping our young people understand that all of that knowledge and history and strength runs through their veins. They've just got to kind of unlock it in a way and have that space to be able to, I guess, open themselves up. Yeah, so I'm really excited. I'm really excited to hear all of the stories here of what everyone, you know, what people didn't learn and what we can learn together. But yeah, I'm just really grateful to be here. So thank you all. I don't want to talk too much.
Thank you, Manny. Just encouraging everyone to put any thoughts, feelings, reflections in the chat. And yeah, Manny, your perspective is really important. And I just wanted to acknowledge some of the messages that are coming through on the chat. Kate Davis saying that I learned that First Nations people were hunter-gatherers, and I remember being told that Australia was the only country that became a nation without a war, which of course wasn't true. So I guess, yeah, to what Manny's talking about, yeah, to hear from, you know, older people that the next generation still, you know, that message isn't coming across, I guess, in Manny's generation. Hopefully this next younger ones, we're hearing a lot, yeah, a lot more honest truths there. But this is part of our unlearning and our work. Jackie Benton, I didn't learn much at school, but I have Indigenous family who I learned some info from, them professional development the last 35 years. And that's a really common conversation as well, that a lot of teachers are learning, you know, in their later years, because the education system failed them. And that's just the reality. You know, if you come out of tertiary system as a teacher and have never connected to any First People stories of, you know, and it's the country we're in, it still blows my mind. But yeah, doesn't surprise me because we hear it a lot. And maybe just the last one for now. I was educated in the late 1960s, says Joanna, and early 1970s, and we were taught and learnt nothing. from a First Nations perspective. So I guess with those reflections, yeah, a lot of our professional development for teachers, we talk about vulnerability, and we really encourage you to share that with your students. Like, that's just the reality of your education experience. So we're on that learning journey together. There's a lot more similar comments coming through as well. So please keep them coming, and any reflections or emotions that come up for you. I guess, yeah, touching on what Manny said about creating safe learning environments for our students, we need to role model that. So if we can be vulnerable and create our own ways to share, you know, express how we're feeling. That's something that we've really tried to embed in these resources as well from a social and emotional wellbeing perspective. So we're going to go into a little bit of an activity. If you haven't seen the resources there online, SBS Learn has like a one-pager that you can go through, and then Cultures Life have each episode for each year level separated in presentation decks, which we're really proud of. So you can literally, like, you know, put them in, project them in the classroom. But Sophia is going to show, this is one example of a classroom activity that's in the episode 1 resources that I'm just going to ask you to reflect on now. This is about memorials and monuments. So Manny just spoke about honouring our local heroes and our Aboriginal warriors that often haven't been, you know, told about and spoken of. So does your local community have local memorials and commemoration for the forgotten soldiers of the Frontier Wars? And something you can start with your students is to think about all the memorials and acknowledgements we have around the country for wars fought overseas as a comparison. But yeah, just to think about that. Do you know of any massacre sites in your local area? The resources also lead you to Professor Lyndall Ryan, who's done work on the National Massacre Map. And massacre being, I think it's 6 or more evidence of 6 or more murders in one place. So this is not including individual bloodshed, but yeah, if you don't know much about your local school area, that's where we really encourage you to start your personally and with your students. So if yes, how can you participate? And if not, how can you change this? So there's a research activity in here. Research a person or a colonial event using primary and secondary sources from this series. You can use other sources as well in your local area. Then, yeah, just getting students to reflect on, and you can do this now as well. Do you feel an additional plaque or some kind of acknowledgement needs to be added in your area to honour these? And, you know, most areas somewhere near you would have evidence of frontier war violence. So you can also encourage your students to draw a memorial or a plaque to commemorate the lives that are lost there, and acknowledging too that that's Aboriginal as well as European lives that are shed on this land. And there's some other activities in there that have a look at or get students to reflect on the colonial experience as well. So we've really tried to give that shared history perspective. So that's just an example of one of the resources. So now I'm going to throw to Belinda Duarte, our Deadly CEO, who's going to talk about significance of this work and relationship building for educators. So Annie Bin. Spotlight.
Okie doke.
And spotlight. Here we go.
Okay. It's always a bit weird looking at yourself when you're doing these webinars and you're in the spotlight. Dog Moal, Nyonyek Belinda Duarte, Doki Dog, thank you. In my language, the Wagaya language from Northwest Victoria, I want to acknowledge I'm on the Norak Willam country of the Bunwarang and also the Wurundjeri Wurrung here in Melbourne. Pay my deepest respect to their elders past and present, and extend that acknowledgement to First Nations people in space with us tonight, the country you're on, and to the ancestry that brings you to the table. Often in these settings, as whether it's a direct educator and teacher in a classroom or as a part of the workforce in shaping what our young minds our young minds are learning and how they feel in spaces. I do want to acknowledge that there is a really significant choice that comes with working in the education system. I am a qualified teacher, a secondary teacher, and my love of teaching still exists, and my journey, particularly around social justice for First Nations people, has brought me into a role and which has meant that we are obviously as an organisation producing and implementing something that is fairly rare, and that is Aboriginal-led curriculum content. And I do want to acknowledge that there are some great resources out there, and it's important for us to get as many resources as we can. But the next level really is that we're proud of is that it is Aboriginal-led content, and that we were actually including those young minds like Amani, who has been more recently through an education pathway to actually give their personal context as a First Nations young person, and how critical that is. We have to have those spaces in which our young people feel seen, heard, and in some cases where they don't understand or they're not aware of it, in becoming aware, are really held in a way in which is appropriate for their well-being. Because as some of you that have actually seen the series, it's very, very confronting. Truth-telling in this country will heal us and will continue to heal us. And, as the theme has been around local inspiration, what our intention is for us to really see where we can have sites build and inspired content on the country that they are located or in the region. Last week, I was at a forum, education regional forum here in Victoria, and I do want to say that the yarn I had with that sort of cohort of the workforce, 400 odd people in the room, was we talked about on your watch. I just wanted to pause and allow people that moment to think about, you've come to us with the interest in this curriculum resource and the power of it. On your watch, what are you going to do with that? And in your roles, what will you ensure is implemented and embedded not only in your classrooms, but what is inspired as part of that behaviour? One of the things that I did want to talk about is that if I could do anything, it would be to fast track the minds and hearts, or hearts and minds of every Australian, to be deeply immersed in this content. So, for those of you that don't feel that you are in positions of leadership to influence that, can I remind you of how influential you actually are? The way in which you behave and model and inspire that engagement is so important and can transform schooling environments. And, I've had the privilege of working in the AFL system, did work with a cohort of AFL football clubs and their cheer squads. And through one cheer squad member with an idea to actually undertake more cultural awareness training, that seeded and inspired industry engagement to continue to do that. So just wanted to pick that example up of how important it is for every person that's joined us tonight to remember the significance of your role and what your contribution is, particularly on your watch. Finally, for you to consider and be ensuring that you're monitoring what is actually being implemented as a part of the curriculum. Each state obviously have, a whole range of Aboriginal strategies in different ways, whether it's workforce strategies, whether it's, student-focused strategies, and nationally what that means. but really, how are you ensuring and monitoring that you are taking on a very critical role of, in this generation, what is going to be the change, and particularly around the Australian Wars series and the truth of that, how important that is to get out there and share, not only with students but with the workforce, the school community, and more broadly around your regions and states. On that note, I will hand it back to Thara.
Thanks, Ben. I just want to take a moment just to acknowledge some of the comments and questions in the chat from Kerry. In the 1960s, 70s, in my very white, very Anglo primary and high school in Victoria, I learned that Aboriginal people lived in the desert, but none lived in Tasmania anymore. The rich local history and heritage of my region was never spoken about. I asked my parents about local Aboriginal people, and they said that there weren't any. Fortunately, my curiosity and social justice orientation and the immense goodwill of Aboriginal people I met taught me some truths over time. That makes me teary. That Tasmanian reference, the second part of our Heal Our History campaign is about to come out. If you haven't seen the first that Manny's in, we're about to throw to a little snip of it in a moment. But Auntie Vicky Clark spoke about that as an Aboriginal woman. That was her education, that there's no Aboriginal people left in Tasmania. And I think it's episode 2, I should know this by now, that looks at when martial law was declared and the history of the invasion of Tasmania and the Frontier War violence, and how extreme that was everywhere, but particularly in Tasmania. So debunking some of those myths and healing from that narrative as well is massive. So you sharing that is huge. So thank you, Kerry. And that's something that you can share with young people. This is what you were taught. This was the misconceptions and the impacts, but this is what we can do about it now. And that's the power of truth telling. So thank you for sharing that. Other people sharing their reflections about what they learned in the Frontier Wars in schools. But I just want to see if there was any big questions before we go to the Heal Our History campaign. A lot of people saying there was nothing taught at schools in the 80s, 90s, 70s. Michaela, so wonderful to hear your perspectives, Manny. Thank you for sharing the importance of local storytelling and the need for compassion. Your positive perspective is inspiring. I agree. I'm just looking for any questions. But yeah, we'll get back to these, and if there's anything we missed in this time with you tonight, we can always follow up as well. We've got your registration details. But yeah, there was a question. I'm interested in your advice on how you have the conversation about memorials on country, where there is very little information left. That's a great question. There's no one way to go about this, but there's examples in the series of local community groups, Aboriginal and non-Indigenous members of that community, honouring the frontier violence that happened there. There's, examples of annual events and things, but I think this question sort of alludes to if the history is not known. There is the massacre map. There's a lot of information. There's a lot of resources that we link to be able to look for this history. There's no one way. There's 5 First Nations historians that Rachel found in her research that exists, like at that academic historian level. But a lot of it is oral storytelling. So it's connecting with your local community. Most local Aboriginal community members would know that history. So that's what we really encourage you to do. It's no one-stop shop, but that the map that we link to is pretty incredible, and that's years and years of research. So yeah, I just might go to the next bit and we'll come back to these questions later. Thanks, Dudley, for saying. We also have a great resource. They talk about country music artists, so as well. If you've not seen it, look it up. So you can throw in, some ideas as well. There's so much out there. There's so many stories, art, songs are really powerful ways as well. So thank you for reminding us of that. Different mediums of storytelling. But I just want to quickly throw to the Heal Our History campaign. So if that's okay with your deadly slides here. But the Heal Our History campaign was basically born out of a need for us to talk about truth telling mainstream. So these resources, obviously for a school audience, is who's going to get the most eyes over this, but we want to share firstly young people's perspectives on this history, and then we're about to release some roundtable conversations with a couple of people that are on this call right now, but people in the education system, and yeah, with different perspectives looking at the responsibility from a systemic level. So have some more professionals in the second conversations, but I'm just going to show you an example. They're really short videos that Soph's going to play now. This is one of Layla sharing her experience.
Yeah, so Rottnest Island is where they would take Aboriginal men from all over Western Australia as prisoners. So it's the largest site for Aboriginal deaths in custody in Australia. I remember before we went, we were all really windy about going. And then Uncle Len said to us, it's important that we go there. And it's important that we let the old people and the ancestors there know that we still think about them, we still talk about them, that they haven't been forgotten about. And after he said that to me, I was still a little bit windy, but I also felt, especially as a Noongar woman, a responsibility to let, my ancestors and my old people there know that they haven't been forgotten about and that I exist because of them. After everything that they went through, here I am living this life that I am living because of their resistance. I don't think I would have gone if it wasn't with Uncle Len and with the fellowship mob, because we went with purpose and with intention, and we went and said hello, and we just did it right.
Thanks, Sue. Just for context, Layla Quartermain was in the fellowship program last year with Manny, and we went to Wajak Noongar, where I am now, but over to Wajimuk, Rottnest Island. And for those who haven't seen episode 3, Uncle Len Collard shares the history of Rottnest Island with a lot of Western Australian mob taken there as Australia's largest prison camp. So, yeah, given the spiritual effects of that type of trauma taking place somewhere, it's hard for Aboriginal people to visit these places when we talk about massacre sites, for example. But we all had a similar experience. What Layla was explaining then, Uncle Len sort of shifted our perspective on that if we go with intent and purpose to honour our old people that have passed there, then we can use it as a healing experience rather than something to be afraid of or to avoid. So I think it's a really good lesson when we're talking about honouring our local history, that it's something we can lean into when it's done with the intention to heal and to pay respects the same way we would go to a cemetery to see people that are passed, or that will go to a war memorial, for example. So yeah, that was a really big moment for all of us, I think. It really changed the way, that we look at that, and we want to be able to encourage others to do the same thing. So before we sort of open up to questions, we've never been so on time. Oh my God, we're going to have time for questions. I really rushed at the beginning, sorry. But I just wanted to show an example of a mind map. So we talk about protecting and creating culturally safe environments for all our students, but part of looking after our social and emotional well-being is to be able to brief and debrief when we're having these hard conversations and learnings, and to find time, prioritize time in the classroom for young people to be able to express and debrief about these conversations. So this example in the resource, Sophie, if you can please pop it up, is written as a mind map. So this is in episode 1's resource, but it basically asks students in small groups or pairs with some paper, just to get them to write down some dot points. And you can turn that into a mind map, or they can draw or do it creatively. But I just wanted to allow some time for you to do this with the conversations we've had today, and then we'll open up to questions and refer to some other comments and questions in the chat as well. And myself, Manny and Belinda, you can aim them at any of us or all of us, but just think about what did you learn from this 45 minutes in a lifetime. And it could just be, you know, about what you're thinking about or focusing on. How are you impacted? Probably relates to the last question in a more simpler level, especially when we're talking to young people. How do you feel? What moved you? What triggered emotions? And just to check in how you feel now, and you can do that verbally as well. There's some yarning circle techniques that it's good cultural practice too, just to be able to say one word, and usually say not good or tired, because they're simple one answers, or hungry. But yeah, just really check in how the young people feel before you let them go from, you know, their classroom into the day with what's bubbling around their head. What can we do with these learnings is a massive one. So part of processing is to think about, you know, what some actions going forward, especially for young Aboriginal people here and Torres Strait Islanders in your classroom, you know, hearing these yarns, so that they don't take away, just, you know, walk away with the pain of it. They can actually think about how can we heal from it. As well as non-Indigenous students. This is our shared history, and whether it's like victim or perpetrator, we all hold different emotions around these learnings. So that's basically the same as what now in different ways. And you can frame this however you want, but that's just an example. So yeah, just encourage students to take it away with you, or you can give it to the classroom teacher. I mean, you know what to do, what's the best idea, but you could also revisit it in the next session, but just as long as they have an opportunity to express, different types of activities are encouraged in the resources. So in saying that, if you want to pop in any of those responses about, you know, what you learned or how you're feeling into the chat, otherwise we can open up if anyone wants to be brave and ask questions, unless Belinda, you wanted to say anything before we open up to questions. All good. Yeah. If anyone wants to speak, they can just unmute themselves, or can you raise hands? I'm not.
I'll start if you like. I'd like to know some more about the resources that you were talking about that are led by people in the community, rather than you know, that were written by people who are not, you know, who don't know, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. So
That
like,
makes sense.
yeah, resources like organizations or individuals to reach out to find the local history. Is that?
No. You were saying that there's teaching resources, content that's been developed by First Nations educators.
Yeah.
And I'm really interested to find out more about that.
Right. So can you please pop the link in the chat? So on Culture is Life's website, we've got an education portal there, and the Australian Wars is one of our education resources that we've been lucky to work on. It asks for like a one-time login, so just to get that, you know, email and basic information. But yeah, once you're in, they're all freely available, free to access, and they're in like the slide deck similar to what we just described. There's some guides to teaching First Nations knowledges and perspectives safely in general in the curriculum, and there's a separate teaching First Nations knowledges and perspectives guide that you can link to there as well. So yeah, that's when Belinda talks about that Aboriginal-led collaborative young person engaged resources, that's what, yeah, we're proud to be working on and constantly evolving. So that's on the Culture Slice website, and it's just been popped in the chat to me, to everybody. There we go.
Thank you. Thanks for that.
No worries. Thank you. Emma just said, I loved hearing the young woman just recently reflecting on her gratitude to the elders for the life she now lives. It was a beautiful and moving sentiment, and ties beautifully to NAIDOC, which keep your eyes out. Some NAIDOC resources for our elders. We've been blessed to work on the national NAIDOC curriculum, which is coming out soon, and it's got some beautiful activities to do that local piece with your elder stories as well, and includes researching some of our elders past, which includes our warriors and our heroes as well, related to the Frontier Wars. So would anyone else like to ask a question directly, or we can go through the chat?
Can I say something, if that's okay? As I don't know whether anybody noticed, my daughter sort of landed into me in the background before. It's that time of night and she's got no radar sometimes. It doesn't matter how many times I say to her, hey, I've got quite a few people that I'm doing a workshop with. I did want to acknowledge that some of the resources that Thara has mentioned, you know, we've got Back to Nature, Stolen Gem resources, there's NAIDOC resources coming out as well. There's a number of other organisations that have very specific resources, but I do encourage you to really, you know, retain that curiosity. If there's one thing that I think about, you know, where you feel you don't have the knowledge and you've been through your training or you've had your years experience of doing specific subject content, the biggest thing you can inspire in our young people is that, you know, extraordinary drive and appetite to be curious and build and retain and model healthy relationships of respectfully allowing the right people to lead conversations, to, you know, build your capacity and knowledge. There are organisations or schools that will have reconciliation action plans. Who's on that? Who's inspiring that? There's champions you will know about. And where you don't, you know, I mean, continue to retain that lifelong appetite as custodians of this country. Whether you are aware or not, you have that cultural responsibility to be infused with the country that you're on, immersed in it. And when you look at our brothers and sisters over the ocean and how critical that cultural history is in their identity, in advocating with the same level of passion and awareness, even if you aren't aware, by your passion and your curiosity and your intent, and the intention that Thaz was talking about earlier is really critical in helping drive and fast track some of this awareness that has been denied for all of us collectively. So yeah, back to questions. That's my little rant there.
There's a big question in the chat, Manny. I might put you on the spot if you do want to share your perspective. But the question is exactly how exactly it is, but how we prepare students, how do we prepare students to visit the shrine or other war memorials? Why are we visiting here? Perhaps that's how we prepare about this project. Intention, understanding, respects. Do you have any thoughts on that, Manny, about preparing young people to visit these places? It's a big one.
Yeah, sorry, I'm trying to see that question again. Where is that?
Yeah, I'll throw it out to you.
How do we prepare our young people? Oh, here we go. Yep. How we prepare students
From A.
to
Jackson.
visit the-
32. Sorry, I didn't know how to copy it.
So yeah, okay. I think it's about, you know, how, you know, like Uncle Len told us when we visited Wajima, is we've got to go there with the right intent. And it's important that when we're visiting these certain sites, war memorials, massacre sites, wherever, you have to have an open mind to really understand the impacts that had happened and that they're still being felt today. You know, we still have our communities being, you know, sorry, that's just my brother burping in the background. Yeah, like it's really important, you know, for our young people to go there. I think it shows a sense of, you know, it's all about shared history, and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander or not, to visit your local sites, you're honoring the lands you're walking on and the people that paved the way before us. You know, visiting these certain places, you know, like we understand how important each of our lands are now, and even how roads are built and certain, you know, we're trading lines and our connections to other towns. Like, it's important to go there and honor the old people before us, because, you know, we have to go out and be very respectful and mindful of what we do on the lands. And, you know, like where I am now, our mines are built on certain, you know, ceremonial grounds, or there's certain businesses or development, you know, that's built on ceremonial grounds or sacred sites. And, you know, the spiritual, I guess, effects that it has on our people is immense, and which isn't talked about enough. So if we're going there and visiting these certain places, prepare your students, or anyone, any young person, anyone you're with, prepare them for the emotions and the spiritual feeling that's there at that place. You know, when we visited Wajma, which was still, like Layla said, we were all a bit windy going there, but we have to pay our respects to those elders and the old people before us. And, you know, learn about, I'll teach them, you know, the importance of why we're actually visiting them. And it's because of that, you know, the local students will understand why they want to visit there. And, you know, like even now I want to visit the Battle Mountain Massacre site here on Kalkadoon country. And I grew up being told not to visit that place because of I guess the spirits and the things that are there and what had happened. But changing your perspective of it's honoring them and it's part of our healing, you know, each of us will walk away with a sense of this newfound, I guess, connection and appreciation to the land we're on. I think my brother wants to say hello.
Hi.
Say hello. Yeah, all right. I'm talking to you now.
Hi.
You know,
Ben just wants to jump in and say something. Sorry.
Yeah,
and then
Ben.
I'll wrap up. Just conscious of time. Yeah. Thanks, Ben. Thanks, Benny.
Oh, look, I just on the war memorial stuff, what I think is really significant, and Rachel talks about it in the series, is the volume of lives that were lost. The volume of lives that were lost that we've been shown to date through evidence is higher than those lost in any collective wars internationally on our international war service efforts. And framing contextually those elements of military violence that have occurred on the country that we are on. And, you know, I guess framing that when you take the students through any war memorial activity. The other thing to mention is that there is development work that we are doing with the Australian War Memorial, particularly around the research piece, a research allocation to really build more content specifically with the Frontier Wars, as well as Aboriginal service throughout those the wars that have occurred, and how that might be integrated into curriculum as well. There is currently stories there and live, and really wanted to encourage people to keep an eye and watch the space on how that evolves. Back to you, Thara.
Just to wrap up, just wanted to thank everyone for their time and their questions. If there's anything that we didn't get to, we'll try to get back to you, or we'll make a note for the next series as well. Remembering this is a 3-part series. If you can make the next 2 parts, we have some really special guests. We have some members of the education department that's on this call, Adam, who'll be joining us in the next episode, and I'm calling it an episode, the next part, like we have our own series, like the Australian Wars, you know what I mean? And then the final part, we're lucky enough to be joined by one of the historians from the film as well. So if there's any questions to ask from a historical perspective, or like a bigger systematic perspective next week as well, from the education department, no pressure, Adam. But yeah, just to start like thinking about that as well. It's why we've made it a 3-part. One's never enough, and things are going to come to you through, in your head. So if you can write them down for the next one, that would be amazing. This one was about recognition, and then we're going into resistance next week, and then into remembrance. So we'll touch a little bit more on that healing piece and the way that we can honour and action some of this truth telling as well. So that was the idea in the process of the journey. You can sign up anytime. So if there's anyone that wants to join from your school or community, please flick them the link, and we'll send some more EDMs out to annoy people in the lead up. But so that we can continue to do the work we do and offer this for free as well, we really ask you if you can take some time to complete a survey. It's going to be emailed around 5:30 East Coast time. So that would be really appreciated. The more feedback we get, the better we can, better our work. You guys know how that works. But thank you to everyone who's throwing some love and feedback in the chat. If anything comes up, info@cultureslife.org. I don't manage that email, so lucky to anyone who does. No, please I'll pop mine in the chat as well. If there's any ideas or feedback, something that you'd like to touch on as well. And Ben just wants to say something.
Yeah. Just for a reminder that we're about to go into a moment in history, and I encourage each of you to ensure that you're informed about the referendum and what that means as a part of, the theme of recognition, and what that means around, the history of rights reform and recognition that has been advocated for First Nations people for many, many years, and what that looks like, whether it is your awareness of the Uluru Statement from the Heart with Voice Treaty Truth, different states you're in. We have treaty processes that are occurring, truth-telling processes here in Victoria, Rook, some amazing stuff coming up there, a really live way to keep up to speed on what is happening in these primary areas. I don't know who A. Jackson is there, but the pump up to the yes, yeah. If you are saying yes, make sure you are informed about what your choice is. We're excited. I am excited by, ensuring that people are informed in this space. So thanks for joining us. Thara, any other closing comments?
No, that's everything. Thanks so much. Thanks to Belinda and Manny and Rachel as well for her time. And thank you all for your time. And I hope to see you again next time on 21st of June. Yeah. Thanks so much. Have a beautiful evening, everybody.
Doki dog.
Better.
See everyone.